So, of course, this week we had a major story about bad airplane behavior. That flight, that Montreal-Cancun flight that, was a big old party, and now we find out there were unvaccinated people and people without their vaccine passports, and then they partied it up and they were drinking and there was no mask, whole bunch of stuff. So we were thinking about this story and how to do it differently. And I said, let's talk to someone that's been a flight attendant for a long time, that has lots of experience, who can tell us, not about a charter flight that has a party. That's one thing. But I wanted to talk about the worst airplane behavior, because we've all been on a flight. We've all been there, right? Where you're on a flight and your seatmate, someone you've never met before in your life, or the person in front of you or behind you, is just the worst and is rude and obnoxious and does things, and you're like, man, that is unacceptable behavior on a plane. So let's find out about that unacceptable behavior. We're going to start things off with a former Air Canada flight attendant, 10 years, in fact, as a flight attendant, and then we'll take some of you at 514-790-0800. It's our pleasure to welcome Shakti Langlois-Ortega, as I mentioned, a former Air Canada flight attendant. Shakti, welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. Thank you.
First off, let's talk about you a bit. So you spent 10 years as a flight attendant?
I did. I started in 2010. And I stopped working right as the pandemic was getting kind of crazy.
And did you leave the job because of the pandemic, or it just coincided?
No, I did. So we all, as most flight attendants, we all got laid off in June of 2020, and then started getting called back almost a year later. Most of my colleagues are now back, but I decided to go a different way, and I moved to New York City, actually, where I am right now.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, very cool, very interesting. So let's look back at the 10 years and the behavior you saw from passengers. Let's forget about the partying plane from Montreal to Cancun. That we all know that's unacceptable behavior. But what was the kind of stuff that you would see on flights that you and your colleagues would say, "Oh my God, you won't believe this person"?
Yeah. I must say I've been lucky in 10 years. I've had colleagues that have been punched in the face or had to physically restrain a passenger. I can say I'm lucky. I've never been punched in the face before, but I feel a lot of passengers get really, really angry for very small things that I feel in the everyday life they wouldn't necessarily get angry about. But once they're on a plane, it sort of takes it to different proportions. I had a passenger once. I picked up a can that had been really cold, so there was a bit of water around it, and 2 drops of water fell on his elbow. And he immediately got up from his seat and started yelling at me, and he was about 2 inches from my face, pointing his finger really close to my nose and saying, "Oh, what is this?" Da, da, da. And I was obviously really startled. And it was so bad that the passengers around him got really mad at him and pulled him back. And they were like, "What are you doing?" It was a disproportionate reaction to two drops of water.
To 2 drops of water. Now, Shakti, you mentioned before alcohol, right, and your colleagues. And so let's talk about alcohol on planes, and how much do the problems or the bad behavior you see, how often does it relate to alcohol?
I mean, it depends on the flights. It depends on the routes. I had two young women that were extremely drunk one day, and one of them decided it would be a good idea to slap my butt. Things like that.
Wow.
People try to sometimes steal alcohol. I've actually had a really close friend of mine. 2 girls stole bottles from the duty-free carts. And they got really, really drunk off the duty-free. So I think it depends on the flights. On business flights, for example, or early morning flights, is really rarely going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. But I would say on, let's say, Vegas flights or destination flights, sometimes it's more of a problem. And I think it's the flight attendant's responsibility in a way to make sure that we keep an eye on how many drinks people have, but it's definitely a passenger's responsibility to make sure that they don't bring their own alcohol and that they listen to flight attendants when we cut them off, because often we do have to cut some people off.
While I have you on the line here, Shakti, we're with Shakti Langlois-Ortega, former Air Canada flight attendant. While I have you on the line, can you what were your thoughts on this story this week of this plane, the Montreal-Cancun plane with the partiers and all that stuff? What's your take?
I mean, it's hard for me to judge because I don't necessarily know the Sunwing's rules and all the details of how things went down. But I can say that I'm really surprised. I don't think that would have happened on most airlines. I feel like most flight attendants would have definitely stopped it or done everything they could before it degenerated and got to that point. And I feel probably, at least in my experience, pilots would have been involved. I've been in flights where we've had to remove passengers or even turn the plane around because the passenger was being either disrespectful or not respecting the rules, and the pilot just decided to turn back or divert and land somewhere else, and passengers were met with authorities and things of the sort. So I feel like, again, I don't really know the exactly what happened, but I feel like that's something that shouldn't have happened and that would probably not happen on most airlines or most flights.
One last quick question for you, Shakti. Forget about the stuff that is illegal. When you assault someone, when you or sexually assault, you sexually harass someone. Those are things. Those are faux pas. Let's talk about the annoying things. What are the annoying things that passengers do that we should all be on the lookout of maybe not doing ourselves?
Yeah, I feel it's often the things that people get really upset at, things that we have no control over. If your choice of sandwich is no longer available, we have passengers really, really get extremely upset. Maybe we don't have any more Diet Coke, and they get really, really mad. But as a flight attendant, we're in the front lines. We're those decisions of how much stuff gets put on the plane or what Transport Canada rules are. Those are things that we have no control over, and we're just there to enforce them. And I feel like a lot of passengers, they get really, really upset for things that really are out of our control, or if it's weather, and now it's the winter time, and de-icing, for example, takes a long time, or there's delays because of snow, and people get so frustrated. But really, it's things that we can't control. So I'd say that would be one thing. Also, the other small rules like bringing up their seats, the seat back, for takeoff and landing. I had several passengers say, well, I'm not going to bring my seat up until this guy puts his seat up, or, adults that have very childlike behaviors.
Oh, man. I can't imagine.
Really,
Shakti, what are you doing in New York, Shakti? What's the new life? What's the new career?
I'm pursuing a master's in journalism at Columbia University.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Hey, you got a great voice. You're going to go places. That's amazing. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Come back anytime with your insight. I love that.
Thank you for having me.
That's Shakti Langlois-Ortega, former Air Canada flight attendant.